There is a road in California that does not look like much. It is a two-lane street lined with low buildings, trees, and the occasional jogger. Most drivers pass through without a second thought, heading somewhere else. But this road, just 3.5 miles long, helped create an industry that changed the world. It is a road that turned apricot orchards into billion-dollar companies, that transformed a sleepy valley into the engine of the digital age. This is the story of Sand Hill Road, the road that helped build Silicon Valley. Before there were servers and startups, before the venture capitalists and the IPOs, this road ran through fields. In the early 1900s, the area was known for its orchards. Apricots, plums, cherries, and pears grew in neat rows on either side. Families worked the land, picking fruit under the California sun. The road was a dirt track then, used by farmers to bring their harvest to the railroad. It was called Sand Hill Road because the soil was sandy and the road led up a low hill. Nothing about it suggested greatness, but change was coming. After World War II, the Stanford University campus began to grow. Professor Frederick Terman, the dean of engineering, had a vision. He believed that universities should not just teach, they should partner with industry. He encouraged his students to start their own companies. One of those students was William Hewlett, who with David Packard founded Hewlett-Packard in a garage in Palo Alto. That garage is now a historic landmark, but the spirit of innovation quickly spread beyond it. The land around Sand Hill Road was still agricultural, but the university owned much of it. Stanford had been given thousands of acres by Leland Stanford, the railroad tycoon, under the condition that the land could not be sold. By the 1950s, the university needed money, so Stanford decided to lease the land for long terms, up to 99 years. They created the Stanford Industrial Park, one of the first in the world. The idea was to bring high-tech companies onto university property, close to the research and the graduates. The first tenant was Varian Associates, a company that made microwave tubes. Others followed. Hewlett-Packard, already successful, built a large facility there. The park became a hub for electronics and defense contractors. But the real action was happening a few miles away, along Sand Hill Road. That road was still quiet, lined with houses and small shops. Then in 1961, something important happened. A group of wealthy families from the East Coast, the Rockefellers among them, decided to start a venture capital firm on the West Coast. They called it Draper, Gaither, and Anderson, and they set up an office on Sand Hill Road. Venture capital was a new idea. Before that, startups had to rely on banks, which were cautious, or on wealthy individuals who were rare. The venture capital model pooled money from investors and used it to fund young companies in exchange for ownership. It was risky, but it could be wildly rewarding. The first firm on Sand Hill Road was a pioneer. Others saw the potential and moved in. By the 1970s, Sand Hill Road was becoming the center of venture capital in the United States. The firms liked being close to Stanford, close to the engineers, close to the ideas. They also liked being away from Wall Street, where the culture was more conservative. On Sand Hill Road, the dress was casual, the meetings were short, the decisions were fast. A company could pitch its idea in the morning and get a check by lunch. One of the most famous early success stories was from a company called Fairchild Semiconductor. It was founded by 8 engineers who left Shockley Semiconductor, a company that had been started by William Shockley, one of the inventors of the transistor. The defectors were known as the Traitorous Eight. They set up Fairchild in a building not far from Sand Hill Road. Fairchild became the training ground for dozens of future tech leaders. Spin-offs from Fairchild included Intel, AMD, and National Semiconductor, and all of them at some point would seek money from the firms on Sand Hill Road. The road itself was still unremarkable. It had a few gas stations, a coffee shop, a motel, but the offices behind the trees were filled with people who made decisions that shaped the future. In the 1980s, the personal computer revolution took off. Apple, founded in a garage, went public and made its investors rich. That drew even more money to Sand Hill Road. The firms grew larger, more specialized. They funded software companies, biotech firms, internet startups. The real explosion came in the 1990s, with the rise of the World Wide Web. Sand Hill Road became the epicenter of the dot-com boom. The firms there funded companies like Netscape, Google, Yahoo, and Amazon. The money flowed freely. Deals were struck over lunch at the Garden Court Hotel just off the road. The parking lots were full of Porsches and BMWs. The buildings themselves started to change. Low-rise wood and glass structures were replaced by sleek modern offices with atriums and courtyards. But the road stayed the same, 2 lanes, a few blocks long, with a speed limit of 35 miles per hour. The dot-com bubble burst in 2000 and many companies failed. The venture capital industry took a hit. Sand Hill Road was quiet for a while. The firms became more cautious, but the road did not lose its importance. In the years that followed, a new generation of companies emerged. Social media, mobile apps, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, all of them needed capital, and Sand Hill Road was still the place to go. Today, more than half of all venture capital in the United States is managed from firms on or near Sand Hill Road. The road houses the offices of Sequoia Capital, Kleiner Perkins, Excel, and dozens of others. These firms control hundreds of billions of dollars. They have funded companies that are now household names. If you use a smartphone, search the internet, or ride in a Tesla, somewhere along Sand Hill Road there is an investor who helped make that possible. But the road is not just about money. It is about a culture, a way of thinking. The venture capitalists on Sand Hill Road do not just write checks. They mentor founders, they open doors, they recruit talent. They are often former entrepreneurs themselves. They understand the long hours, the failures, the sleepless nights. The best firms look for more than a good idea. They look for passion, resilience, and the ability to adapt. The road itself has a rhythm. In the morning, the coffee shops fill with people in jeans and hoodies, laptops open, talking quietly. By 10, the meetings begin. A startup founder might pitch to 2 or 3 firms in a single day. The presentations are brief, sometimes as short as 15 minutes. The partners listen, ask sharp questions, and then make a call. It is a high-stakes game, and the players are among the smartest in the world. One of the most legendary firms on Sand Hill Road is Kleiner Perkins Caulfield & Byers, often called Kleiner Perkins. It was founded in 1972 by Eugene Kleiner, one of the Traitorous Eight, and Tom Perkins, a former Hewlett-Packard executive. Kleiner Perkins funded Genentech, the first biotech company, and later supported Amazon, Google, and many others. The firm's office is a low-slung building with a bamboo garden and a sign that simply says Kleiner Perkins. Inside, the walls are lined with photos of the companies they have backed. Each photo represents a bet, a risk, a story. Another giant is Sequoia Capital. Founded in 1972 as well, Sequoia is known for its long-term thinking. It backed Apple in the late 1970s, when Steve Jobs was still a young visionary. It funded Google when the company was just a search engine in a garage. Sequoia's partners are famous for their thorough due diligence. They ask tough questions. They look for founders who can execute. Their office on Sand Hill Road is unpretentious, but the power inside is enormous. The road also houses some smaller, more specialized firms. There are funds that focus only on healthcare, on clean energy, on enterprise software. There are micro funds that invest just a few $100,000. There are corporate venture arms from companies like Intel and Microsoft. The diversity of capital on Sand Hill Road means that almost any serious startup can find a willing investor if the idea is good enough. But the road is not the only place. In recent years, venture capital has spread to other parts of the Bay Area. San Francisco has its own concentration, especially in the SoMa district, and there are firms in Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and even Los Angeles. Still, Sand Hill Road remains the symbol. When a startup founder says I am meeting with a venture capitalist, often they mean they are going to Sand Hill Road. The address itself carries weight. It says that you have made it past the first gate. The road has also been a witness to both triumph and tragedy. In the bubble years, parties were lavish and expectations were absurd. Companies with no revenue were valued at billions. When the crash came, many founders lost everything. The road was quiet, with empty offices and for lease signs, but it recovered. The firms that survived learned to be smarter. They became more careful, more patient. The road itself became a place of resilience. Today, Sand Hill Road is also a traffic headache. The two-lane road cannot handle the volume. On a weekday morning, cars back up from the stoplight at Santa Cruz Avenue to the entrance of the Stanford Shopping Center. Newer buildings are being built, and the road is being widened in places. But the character remains. It is a road where ideas become companies, and companies change the world. The history of Sand Hill Road is really the history of Silicon Valley itself. It is a story of risk and reward, of vision and luck, of people who believed that technology could make life better. The road has seen generations of founders, from the pioneers of semiconductors to the wizards of artificial intelligence. Each generation has stood on the shoulders of the ones before, and each has sought the capital and counsel of the firms on Sand Hill Road. As we look back, it is easy to see the road as a symbol of wealth and power, but it is more than that. It is a place where dreams are funded, where a sketch on a napkin can become a billion-dollar business, where an immigrant with an idea can sit across from a partner and say, I think I can change the world, and the partner might listen. In the coming segments, we will go deeper into the stories of the companies and the people that made Sand Hill Road legendary. We will talk about the birth of venture capital, the rise and fall of the dot-com era, and the new wave of innovation that is shaping the future. We will walk the road, meet the players, and understand how a strip of asphalt became the most important street in technology. But first, let us take a closer look at the early days, when Sand Hill Road was still a dirt track, when the only fruit that mattered came from the trees, and when the idea of a computer in every home seemed like science fiction. That is where the story begins, in the quiet years before the boom, when the seeds of Silicon Valley were first planted. In the quiet years before the boom, a parcel of land that would become Sand Hill Road was little more than a dusty path winding through apricot orchards and prune trees. The land had belonged to the Olón people for thousands of years, and later to Mexican rancheros, and then to American settlers who came for the gold rush and stayed for the soil. By the early 20th century, this stretch of the peninsula was known for its gentle climate and its fruit. The road itself was not even named on most maps. It was a rural lane connecting the small town of Menlo Park to the even smaller settlement of Woodside. Horses and wagons were the common traffic. A car was a rare sight, but something else was growing in the region, something invisible and far more valuable than fruit. It began at a university just a few miles to the east. Stanford University had opened its doors in 1891, built on the vast estate of Leland Stanford, a railroad magnate and former governor. From the start, the university was different. It was not an Ivy League school, not a place for the sons of the Eastern elite. It was a Western institution, practical, optimistic, and focused on engineering and science. Leland Stanford had made his fortune building the Transcontinental Railroad, and he believed that education should serve industry. His university would train the builders of the future. For decades, Stanford was a quiet campus. Its faculty were respectable, its students capable, but it lacked the world-changing energy that would later define Silicon Valley. That energy came from a man named Frederick Terman. Terman was a professor of electrical engineering at Stanford, and later the dean of the engineering school. He had a vision. He believed that the university should not just produce graduates, it should be an engine for economic development. He encouraged his faculty to consult with local companies. He urged his best students to start their own businesses. And when World War II came, Terman helped bring defense contracts to Stanford laboratories. The war turned the region into a hub for electronics and radar research. After the war, Terman saw an opportunity. He wanted to build a community of technology companies around Stanford. He called it the Stanford Industrial Park. The idea was simple: lease university land to high-tech firms at low rates so they could be near the campus and its talent. In 1951, the first tenant moved in, a small company called Varian Associates, founded by two former Stanford students, the Varian brothers, who had developed the Klystron tube. Soon other companies followed. Hewlett-Packard, which had been started by two Stanford graduates in a garage in Palo Alto, built its first major facility in the park. The park grew. It became a model for the entire region. But the road that would become the financial artery of this new ecosystem was still a rural lane. Sand Hill Road, as it was called, ran along the northern edge of the Stanford lands, separating the campus from the foothills. It was a two-lane road, unpaved in many places, lined with oak trees and farmhouses. The only notable building was the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, a particle physics laboratory established in the early 60s. The road itself had no significance. It was simply a way to get from the university to the hills. The first venture capital firm to open an office on Sand Hill Road was not a grand affair. It was a modest suite in a low-rise building at the intersection with Santa Cruz Avenue. The firm was called Draper, Gaither and Anderson, formed in 1959, but the real transformation began with a group of 8 men who became known as the Traitorous Eight. They were brilliant engineers and researchers at Shockley Semiconductor Laboratory, founded by William Shockley, the co-inventor of the transistor. Shockley was a genius, but he was also difficult, paranoid, and increasingly erratic. His employees chafed under his management. In 1957, the 8 men decided they had had enough. They left Shockley, and with the help of a New York financier named Sherman Fairchild, founded Fairchild Semiconductor. Fairchild Semiconductor was located in a small building on Charleston Road, not far from Sand Hill Road, but its impact was enormous. The company pioneered the integrated circuit, the silicon chip that would become the building block of all modern electronics, and Fairchild itself was a spawning ground. Over the next decade, dozens of startups spun off from Fairchild, founded by former employees. These were the first true semiconductor companies in what would become Silicon Valley. They needed money, and they needed advice. The venture capital industry was still in its infancy, but it was growing. In 1961, a small firm called Continental Capital Corporation opened an office on Sand Hill Road. Then in 1969, a man named Arthur Rock, one of the earliest venture capitalists, set up shop on the road. Rock had helped finance Fairchild and later Intel. He was a legend, but it was in the early 70s that Sand Hill Road truly began to take shape. Two firms that would define the industry moved onto the road: Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia Capital. Kleiner Perkins was founded in 1972 by Eugene Kleiner, one of the Traitorous Eight, and Tom Perkins, a former Hewlett-Packard executive. They set up their office in a small building at 3000 Sand Hill Road. The office was unassuming, with a bamboo garden and a simple sign. Sequoia Capital, also founded in 1972, started in a different location but soon moved to the same road. Don Valentine, the founder of Sequoia, had been a sales executive at Fairchild and later at National Semiconductor. He understood the semiconductor business intimately. He also understood that the key to great investing was great people. Sequoia would go on to back Apple, Atari, Oracle, and many others. These early venture capital firms did not yet dominate the road. There were still vacant lots and farmhouses, but the seeds were planted, and as the semiconductor industry grew, so did the need for capital. The firms on Sand Hill Road began to attract more investors. Pensions and endowments and wealthy families wanted to put money into technology. The returns were spectacular. A $100,000 investment in Apple in 1978 would be worth tens of millions a few years later. The word spread. By the 1980s, Sand Hill Road was becoming crowded with venture firms. New ones sprouted up every year. The road itself was paved and widened, but still only 2 lanes. Traffic began to build. The buildings along the road grew taller and more modern. But the culture remained the same, a place where engineers and entrepreneurs could pitch their ideas to people who understood the technology. The venture capitalists were often former engineers themselves. They could ask the right questions. They could smell a weak business model from across the table. The story of Sand Hill Road is also the story of the rise of the personal computer. In the late 70s and early 80s, a generation of young founders, many of them college dropouts, came to the road seeking funding. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak pitched Apple to Don Valentine at Sequoia. Valentine was impressed but initially passed, thinking the founders were too inexperienced. He later recommended them to another investor. But Sequoia eventually came around and invested in Apple's later rounds. The company went public in 1980, making millions for its backers. Other iconic companies followed. Oracle, founded by Larry Ellison and Bob Miner, received early funding from Kleiner Perkins. Cisco, founded by a pair of Stanford husband and wife researchers, was backed by Sequoia. Sun Microsystems, started by a group of Stanford graduates, got its start with venture capital from Sand Hill Road. The pattern was clear. The road was where the future was being built, but not every bet paid off. The venture capital industry is defined by failure as much as success. For every Apple, there were 100 companies that never made it. The beauty of the model is that a few big wins compensate for many small losses. The firms on Sand Hill Road understood this. They were willing to take risks, to back ideas that seemed crazy at the time. Who would have thought that a search engine could become $1 trillion business? But Sequoia and Kleiner Perkins believed in Google early on. They saw the potential. The road itself remained humble. Even as billion-dollar companies were born in its conference rooms, the physical environment stayed low-key. There were no marble lobbies or gold-plated fixtures. The offices were functional, even sparse. The partners often wore jeans and casual shirts. The meetings were brief and direct. A founder would walk in, give a 15-minute pitch, and get a decision in a week or less. Speed mattered. In the fast, moving world of technology, a week could be the difference between success and obscurity. The late 80s and early 90s saw a new wave of innovation. Biotechnology emerged as a major sector. Genentech, founded in 1976, was one of the first biotech companies, and it received early backing from Kleiner Perkins. The firm's office on Sand Hill Road became a meeting place for scientists and investors. The road was no longer just about silicon chips. It was about all forms of technology. Then came the internet. In the mid-90s, the World Wide Web exploded into public consciousness. A new generation of entrepreneurs, many of them young and inexperienced, flocked to Sand Hill Road with business plans written on napkins. The venture capitalists were skeptical at first, but the potential was too great to ignore. They poured money into anything with a .com suffix. Companies like Netscape, Yahoo, Amazon, and eBay received funding from firms on the road. The money was easy. The valuations were insane. The parties were legendary. Sand Hill Road became a symbol of the .com boom. The parking lots were full of Ferraris. The restaurants were crowded with deal makers. The Garden Court Hotel became a hub for meetings and celebrations, but the boom was not sustainable. The internet was real, but many of the companies were not. When the bubble burst in 2000, the road fell silent. Empty offices, for lease signs, layoffs. The venture firms that had been reckless were wiped out. The survivors like Sequoia and Kleiner Perkins learned painful lessons. They became more disciplined, more focused on fundamentals. In the years that followed, Sand Hill Road reinvented itself. New companies emerged. Google, which had been funded in the late 90s, became a giant. Social media companies like Facebook were backed by Excel, a firm that had moved onto the road. The road also saw the rise of mobile apps, cloud computing, and artificial intelligence. Each wave brought new faces and new ideas. The venture capitalists adapted. Today, Sand Hill Road is more powerful than ever. The firms on the road manage hundreds of billions of dollars. They have offices in China, India, and Israel. But the heart of their operations remains in that 2-lane road in Menlo Park. It is a place where history is made every day, where a conversation over coffee can launch a company that changes millions of lives, where the dreams of a single founder can become a global enterprise. The road itself is a character in the story of Silicon Valley. It has seen booms and busts, triumph and tragedy. It has been the setting for both incredible generosity and ruthless competition. But above all, it has been a place of hope, a place where people believe that technology can solve problems, create wealth, and improve the world. And that belief, more than any building or address, is what makes Sand Hill Road the most important street in technology. The dot-com crash had left deep scars, but the road itself was resilient. The venture firms that survived did so by sticking to the principles that had built Silicon Valley in the first place, understanding technology, backing great founders, and taking a long-term view. Sequoia Capital, for instance, famously held a meeting in the spring of 2000 where partners gathered in a small conference room and reviewed their portfolio. Many companies were burning cash with no clear path to profitability. The partners decided to write off a significant number of investments and focus their energy on the handful that had real promise. It was a painful but necessary decision. They would emerge leaner and wiser. Kleiner Perkins took a similar approach. The firm had backed a range of internet companies, some of which failed spectacularly, but they also held on to a small stake in a company that would eventually become one of the most valuable in the world, Google. Larry Page and Sergey Brin had pitched their search engine to Kleiner Perkins in 1999, and the firm invested $12 million. That bet alone would eventually return billions. It was a lesson in patience and belief. Not every company would make it, but the ones that did could change everything. In the years following the bubble, Sand Hill Road became more focused on fundamentals. The era of easy money was over. Venture capitalists demanded real revenue, real users, and real business models. They became more involved in their portfolio companies, offering guidance and connections. The road itself began to change physically. New buildings were constructed, but they were designed to foster collaboration. The Garden Court Hotel underwent renovations. The restaurants reopened with a quieter clientele. The parking lots no longer featured Ferraris and Lamborghinis. Instead, they were filled with Priuses and Teslas. The culture shifted from excess to earnestness. One of the most remarkable stories of this period is the rise of a small company called PayPal. Founded in 1998 as a digital payment system, PayPal struggled through the bubble and the crash. By 2001, it was on the verge of collapse, but the founders, including Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, persisted. They moved the company to a small office near Sand Hill Road and worked tirelessly to improve the product. In 2002, PayPal went public and was soon acquired by eBay for $1.5 billion. The real legacy of PayPal, however, was not the company itself, but the people it spawned. Many early employees went on to found or fund some of the most successful companies of the next decades: Tesla, LinkedIn, YouTube, Yelp, and Palantir. They became known as the PayPal Mafia, and many of them returned to Sand Hill Road to raise capital for their new ventures. Sand Hill Road also became a hub for the biotech revolution. In the early 2000s, sequencing the human genome had been completed, and the possibilities were staggering. Venture firms began investing heavily in companies that used genetic information to develop drugs and diagnostics. Genentech, which had been backed by Kleiner Perkins years earlier, became a model for the industry. New firms like Flagship Pioneering and Arch Venture Partners set up offices on the road. They funded companies like Moderna, which would later develop a vaccine for COVID-19 in record time. The road was no longer just about electrons moving through silicon. It was about molecules and cells and the very fabric of life. Then came the age of social media. In 2004, a young Harvard student named Mark Zuckerberg started a website called the Facebook. It quickly spread across college campuses. By 2005, it had millions of users and needed capital. Zuckerberg flew to California and met with several venture firms. He eventually chose Excel Partners, a firm that had recently moved onto Sand Hill Road. Excel invested $12.7 million for an 11% stake. That investment would grow to be worth tens of billions. The deal was done quickly, over a few meetings, in the unassuming offices at 428 University Avenue in Palo Alto, just off the road. Excel's partner Jim Breyer became a board member and helped guide Facebook through its explosive growth. The social network went public in 2012 in one of the largest IPOs in history, but not every social media story had a happy ending. In 2006, a company called MySpace was the dominant social network, with 100 million users. It was owned by News Corp and seemed unstoppable. The founders of MySpace were based in Los Angeles, far from Sand Hill Road. They had raised venture capital but had not cultivated deep relationships with the firms on the road. When Facebook began to eat into MySpace's user base, the venture capitalists who had backed MySpace were unable to help. The company faded into irrelevance. The lesson was clear. Being part of the Sand Hill Road ecosystem meant more than just money. It meant access to a network of talent, advice, and future opportunities. The 2008 financial crisis was another test. The venture capital industry was not immune. Many firms saw their portfolios decline in value, but the road itself proved to be a safe haven. As the public markets crashed, private companies continued to innovate. In 2008, a company called Airbnb was founded by two designers who had an idea to rent out air mattresses in their apartment. They struggled to raise money. They were turned down by dozens of investors on Sand Hill Road. The concept seemed too niche, too risky, but they persisted. They eventually found a believer in Sequoia Capital, which invested at a low valuation. Airbnb would go on to become a global phenomenon, reshaping travel and hospitality. Its founders, Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia, became regulars on the road, often riding their bikes to meetings. The aftermath of the financial crisis also saw the rise of the mobile app economy. The iPhone had launched in 2007, and by 2010, the App Store was exploding. A new generation of companies was built on mobile platforms: Uber, Lyft, Snapchat, Instagram, WhatsApp. Many of them were backed by Sand Hill Road firms. Uber, founded in 2009, raised money from Benchmark Capital, a firm with a long history on the road. The investment was a huge bet on the future of transportation. It paid off handsomely, though not without controversy. The road became a battleground for some of the most aggressive and fast-growing companies in history. In the 2000s, the concept of the unicorn, a private company valued at over $1 billion, became commonplace. Sand Hill Road was the epicenter of this phenomenon. Firms like Andreessen Horowitz, though based in Menlo Park, had a massive presence on the road. They raised enormous funds and made huge bets on companies like Facebook, Twitter, and Airbnb. The road itself began to see an influx of foreign capital. Sovereign wealth funds from the Middle East and Asia, as well as pension funds from Europe and Canada, poured money into the venture firms on Sand Hill Road. The total assets under management on the road grew from under $100 billion in 2000 to over $400 billion by 2010. But with great wealth came great scrutiny. Critics argued that the venture capital industry was creating bubbles and fostering inequality. The culture of Sand Hill Road was often portrayed as insular and elitist. The road was overwhelmingly white and male. Women and minorities struggled to get funding. In response, some venture firms made a concerted effort to diversify their partnerships and portfolios. New funds were created specifically to back underrepresented founders. Slowly, the demographics began to shift, but the road still had a long way to go. The physical landscape of Sand Hill Road changed dramatically in the 2000s. The two-lane road became notorious for its traffic jams. The demand for office space was so high that buildings were renovated and expanded. New complexes rose up, including the iconic 2,500 Sand Hill Road, a 5-story glass tower that houses several major venture firms. The road now felt more like a corporate campus than a quiet suburban street, yet the spirit remained. The meetings were still short. the decisions were still quick. The venture capitalists still asked the same questions. Why you? Why now? Why this? One of the most remarkable stories of the modern era is the rise of the Chinese technology ecosystem. In the 2000s, many Sand Hill Road firms began investing in Chinese companies. Sequoia Capital opened an office in China and backed giants like Alibaba and Meituan. Kleiner Perkins followed suit. The road became a global brand, but the road itself stayed grounded. The partners who traveled to Shanghai or Beijing would return to their offices in Menlo Park and continue to meet with founders who had driven down from San Francisco. The road was the anchor. Then came the pandemic. In early 2020, COVID-19 forced the entire world into lockdown. The offices on Sand Hill Road were empty for months. Venture capitalists worked from home, conducting meetings over Zoom. The pace of deal-making initially slowed, but then accelerated as remote work proved feasible. In 2020 and 2021, venture capital investment in the United States reached record levels. Sand Hill Road firms raised massive funds and made huge bets on companies like Stripe, SpaceX, and Robinhood. The road was busier than ever, even as the physical traffic subsided. The pandemic also accelerated the shift to digital everything. Telemedicine, online education, remote collaboration tools all saw explosive growth. Many of the companies that led these transformations had been backed by Sand Hill Road. The venture capitalists who had been investing for decades saw their patience rewarded. The road had survived another crisis. Today, Sand Hill Road remains the most important street in technology. It is a place where the future is funded, but it is also a place of memory. The bamboo garden at Kleiner Perkins is still there. The simple sign at Sequoia Capital still hangs. The founders who walked through those doors in the 1970s and 1980s are now gray-haired or gone, but new founders arrive every day. They come with the same nervous energy, the same dreams, the same conviction that they can change the world, and the road welcomes them. It offers not just money but mentorship, network, and wisdom. The road itself is a living archive. Every building has a story. Every parking spot has seen 100 pitches. The road remembers the early mornings when Steve Jobs rode his motorcycle to a meeting. It remembers the long nights when Larry Ellison argued over valuation. It remembers the quiet conversations between Tom Perkins and Eugene Kleiner, two men who believed that technology could transform society. It remembers the tears and the laughter, the triumphs and the failures. And the road continues to evolve. The next wave of innovation, artificial intelligence, climate tech, space exploration, quantum computing is already being funded on Sand Hill Road. The venture capitalists of 2025 are different from those of 1975, but the fundamental approach remains the same. They look for great people with great ideas. They take big risks. They trust their instincts. The road that was once a dusty path between orchards is now a global symbol of innovation. It is a testament to the power of believing in the future. And as long as there are dreamers willing to take a chance, Sand Hill Road will be there to greet them. Yet for all its iconic status, Sand Hill Road is not merely a place of triumph. It is also a place of haunting reminders, of the companies that could have been, of the ideas that were too early or too late, of the founders who walked out of a partner meeting knowing they had just lost their last chance. The road has a memory for failure as well as success. In the late 1990s, a young entrepreneur named Chris Sacca pitched Kleiner Perkins with an idea for a mobile payments company. He was nervous, his slides were cluttered, and the partners were skeptical. The timing was wrong, they told him. The mobile infrastructure wasn't ready. Sacca left the office defeated, but he did not give up. He went on to become an early investor in Twitter and Uber, eventually building a billion-dollar fortune. The partners who turned him down later admitted their mistake, but the lesson is baked into the road's culture. Saying no is easy, but saying yes at the right moment is an art that takes decades to master. The road has also seen its share of scandals and controversies. In 2017, a lawsuit against Kleiner Perkins alleging gender discrimination brought the firm into the national spotlight. The trial revealed a culture that many insiders had long known but rarely discussed. The road was a boys' club. Women partners like Ellen Pao had faced systemic bias, and her case became a rallying cry for change. The verdict was mixed, but the damage was done. Venture capital firms across the road began to re-examine their hiring practices, their promotion policies, and the way they treated women and minorities. Some firms made genuine progress. Others performed lip service. But the conversation had started and it would not stop. The road, like the tech industry it serves, is still learning how to be more inclusive. Meanwhile, the physical road itself is almost unrecognizable from its origins. The two lanes have been widened in places, but traffic still snarls at rush hour. The low-slung buildings of the 70s and 80s have been replaced by sleek glass structures with names like the Four Seasons Hotel and the Rosewood Sand Hill. Yet amid this luxury, the fundamental ethos endures. The parking lots are still filled with Teslas and Priuses, but also with bicycles and the occasional skateboard. The coffee shops are still packed with founders rehearsing their pitches. The air hums with a peculiar mix of anxiety and ambition. There is no place quite like it. In the early 2000s, a new wave of founders began to emerge, many of them from backgrounds that would have been unimaginable in the road's early days. Black founders, Latina founders, founders from rural America, founders with disabilities. They brought perspectives that challenged the conventional wisdom. One such founder was Tristan Walker, who founded Walker & Company, a health and beauty brand for people of color. He raised money from Andreessen Horowitz and other firms on Sand Hill Road, but he also faced skepticism from investors who did not understand his market. He persisted, and his company eventually succeeded, proving that diversity was not just a moral imperative but a business advantage. His story is now part of the road's evolving narrative. The venture capital ecosystem on Sand Hill Road has also been reshaped by the rise of megafunds. Firms like Sequoia, Kleiner Perkins, and Andreessen Horowitz now manage tens of billions of dollars. They have expanded into every stage of investment, from seed to growth to public markets. They have also started to invest in alternative assets like crypto, real estate, and even sports teams. The road has become a financial powerhouse, but some worry that it has lost its focus. The original mission of venture capital was to back high-risk, high-reward technology startups. Now some firms are more like asset managers, chasing returns wherever they can find them. The critics say that the road has become too corporate, too removed from the scrappy startups that built it, but the defenders argue that the game has changed. The stakes are higher, the capital requirements are larger, and the road must adapt to stay relevant. One of the most enduring legends of Sand Hill Road is the story of a company that almost never got funded. In 2004, a young Harvard dropout named Mark Zuckerberg was introduced to a venture capitalist named Peter Thiel. Thiel saw something in the boyish founder, something that others missed. He invested $500,000 in Facebook at a valuation of $5 million. That investment, made not on Sand Hill Road but in a conference room nearby, would become one of the greatest returns in venture history. But the road itself was initially skeptical. Many firms turned down Zuckerberg. They thought social networking was a fad. They thought the valuation was too high. They missed the boat. The road has never forgotten that lesson. It has made venture capitalists more willing to take risks on young founders with big visions. The road also bears the scars of the dot-com bust. The early 2000s were a brutal time. Many firms collapsed. Others survived by cutting costs and waiting out the storm. But the road that emerged from the ashes was leaner and more disciplined. The venture capitalists who survived learned to focus on fundamentals, revenue, unit economics, and sustainable growth. They became more cautious but also more strategic. The road's resilience is a testament to its ability to learn from its mistakes. Today, the road is facing a new set of challenges. The rise of artificial intelligence has created both excitement and anxiety. Venture firms are pouring billions into AI startups, but there is a sense of déjà vu. The hype cycle is accelerating. Some worry that we are in another bubble, that the valuations are detached from reality. But others argue that AI is a genuine transformation, as significant as the internet itself. The road is betting big on companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, and Scale AI. The outcome is uncertain, but the road is used to uncertainty. It thrives on it. The physical and cultural changes on Sand Hill Road also reflect broader shifts in the tech world. The headquarters of major tech companies have migrated south to San Jose and even further to Austin and Miami. Some venture firms have opened offices in those cities, but the road remains the center of gravity. There is a reason for that. The road is not just a location. It is a network of relationships that has been built over decades. The partners at Sequoia know the partners at Kleiner because they have worked together on deals, served on boards together, and competed against each other. The road is a small world, and in that world, trust is everything. Perhaps the most poignant story on Sand Hill Road is that of the founders who never made it. The ones who gave up after their first rejection, the ones who ran out of money, the ones who sold their companies for pennies. Their names are forgotten, but their struggles are woven into the fabric of the road. Every building has been the site of 100 heartbreaks, And yet, the road does not dwell on failure. It moves on. It looks for the next big thing. It is built on forward momentum. As the sun sets over the Santa Cruz Mountains, the glass towers on Sand Hill Road catch the golden light. The venture capitalists are heading home, their meetings done for the day. But in the offices, the lights stay on. The associates are still working, analyzing deals, calling founders, reading pitch decks. The road never sleeps. It is always hungry for the next innovation. In the end, Sand Hill Road is more than a street. It is a symbol of American entrepreneurship, of the belief that a good idea can change the world. It is a place where young people with nothing but a laptop and a dream can walk into a room and walk out with a check that changes their lives. It is a place where the impossible becomes possible. And as long as there are dreamers, Sand Hill Road will be there, ready to say yes, ready to take a chance, ready to build the future. The pandemic of 2020 tested Sand Hill Road in ways that nothing else had. When the world shut down, the venture capitalists packed up their offices and went home, just like everyone else. But the road did not go silent. Instead, the deal-making shifted to Zoom calls, and the parking lots emptied of Teslas but filled with delivery vans. The road adapted, as it always has. Some firms embraced remote pitching, and they discovered that geography mattered less than they had thought. A founder in Omaha or Bangalore could now get the same attention as a founder in Palo Alto. The road became more accessible, at least for a while, but the human element remained. Best deals still happened because of trust, and trust is hard to build through a screen. So when the restrictions lifted, the venture capitalists returned to their offices, and the handshakes resumed. But the road had learned a lesson. It could no longer take its centrality for granted. One of the most remarkable stories to emerge from the pandemic was the resurgence of biotechnology. Before 2020, biotech was a niche sector on Sand Hill Road, overshadowed by software and social media. But when the world needed a vaccine, the road responded. Venture firms poured money into companies like Moderna, BioNTech, and a host of smaller startups working on mRNA technology. The road had always been about moonshots, but this was different. This was life and death. The scientists and founders who had been toiling in obscurity suddenly found themselves in the spotlight. They raised money quickly, and they delivered results. The vaccine development timeline was compressed from years to months, and Sand Hill Road played a critical role in funding the companies that made it possible. The road proved that it could be not just profitable but essential. That success also sparked a wave of investment in health tech. Telemedicine companies like Teladoc and Ro saw explosive growth. Digital therapeutics firms like Akili Interactive and Pear Therapeutics attracted funding. The road had always been fascinated by the idea of disrupting healthcare, but the pandemic made it a necessity. The old barriers, regulatory hurdles, slow adoption by doctors, skepticism from insurers began to crumble. The venture capitalists saw an opportunity, and they moved quickly. The result was a new ecosystem of health startups that promised to make medicine more personalized, more accessible, and more efficient. The road was no longer just about software eating the world. It was about software saving lives, but with great success comes great temptation. The low interest rates of the pandemic era created an environment where capital was cheap and abundant. The road raised record amounts of money, and the firms had to put it to work. Valuations soared. Founders who had never turned a profit were valued at billions. The road was drunk on its own success. Some venture capitalists warned that the party would end, but they were drowned out by the noise. The IPOs and SPACs made millionaires out of employees and investors alike. The road seemed invincible. Then came 2022 and the hangover. Interest rates rose and the easy money dried up. The public markets turned against tech stocks and the private markets followed. The road entered a period of contraction. Firms laid off employees. Startups that had raised huge rounds at sky-high valuations were forced to downsize or close. The road became cautious again. The term down round entered everyday vocabulary. The venture capitalists who had been so quick to write checks now demanded more discipline. They wanted to see real revenue, real customers, and a clear path to profitability. The road was learning the hard way that growth at all costs is not a sustainable strategy. This cycle of boom and bust is not new to Sand Hill Road. In fact, it is a pattern that has repeated itself every decade or so. The road thrives on disruption, but it also suffers from its own excesses. The key is to survive the downturns and emerge stronger. The firms that do are the ones that remain disciplined, that stick to their principles, that know when to say no even when everyone else is saying yes. Sequoia, for example, has weathered multiple crashes because it always returns to its core philosophy: back exceptional founders, focus on durable businesses, and be patient. Other firms have not been so lucky. One of the most talked about failures of the recent downturn was the collapse of FTX. The cryptocurrency exchange was once the darling of Sand Hill Road. Major firms like Sequoia, Paradigm, and others had invested billions. The founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, was celebrated as a genius. But when the house of cards collapsed, the road was left with egg on its face. The venture capitalists had done the due diligence, but they had also been seduced by the hype. The lesson was harsh. Even the best firms can be fooled. The road had to confront its own fallibility. It had to ask itself whether it had lost its judgment. Some firms admitted they had been too trusting. Others doubled down on their conviction that crypto was still the future. The debate continues, but the scar remains. Despite these setbacks, Sand Hill Road remains the epicenter of venture capital. The reason is simple: the people. The street attracts the smartest, most ambitious, and most driven individuals in the world. They come from all walks of life, but they share a common belief that they can change the world through technology. That belief is infectious. It draws founders from everywhere, and it gives them the courage to pursue impossible dreams. The road is built on stories, and every story has a lesson. Take the story of a founder named Jessica. She was a first-generation immigrant from Vietnam who grew up in a small apartment in San Jose. She studied computer science at a state school and worked for a few years at a mid-sized tech company. Then she had an idea, a platform that would help small businesses manage their inventory using artificial intelligence. She had no connections, no wealthy relatives, and no prior startup experience. But she had a prototype and a relentless work ethic. She cold-emailed dozens of venture capitalists on Sand Hill Road. Most ignored her. A few gave her a polite no. But one partner at a medium-sized firm agreed to meet. She drove to the road in her 10-year-old Honda Civic, parked in the garage, and walked into the building. The partner listened to her pitch for 30 minutes. He asked tough questions. She had answers. At the end, he said, "I believe in you." He wrote her a check for $2 million. That company is now worth over $500 million. Jessica is a millionaire, but she still drives that same Honda Civic. She says it keeps her grounded. Her story is one of thousands, but it captures the essence of the road. It is a place where a single yes can change a life. But for every Jessica, there are 100 founders who never get that yes. They leave the road defeated, their dreams deferred. Some of them try again, others give up. The road is a harsh judge. It rewards the few and discards the many. That is the nature of venture capital. It is a business of outlier bets. The firms know that most of their investments will fail. But they also know that one success can cover all the failures. That is the math. That is the mindset. And it is why the road can be so unforgiving to the founders who do not fit the mold. In recent years, there has been a growing movement to change that mold. Some venture firms have started to focus on impact investing, backing companies that address social and environmental challenges. Others have developed programs specifically for underrepresented founders. The road is slowly becoming more aware of its own biases, but change is slow and the road is often resistant to it. The old guard still dominates. The partners are still mostly white and male. The culture is still competitive and sometimes cutthroat, but the cracks are appearing. The next generation of venture capitalists is more diverse, more empathetic, and more willing to challenge the status quo. As we look to the future, Sand Hill Road faces existential questions. Will remote work make the road obsolete? Will the rise of decentralized finance and blockchain create new funding models that bypass traditional venture capital? Will the road's dominance in the United States be challenged by rising ecosystems in China, Europe, and India? The answer is not clear, but history suggests that the road will adapt. It has survived the dot-com bust, the financial crisis, the pandemic, and now the crypto crash. With each crisis, it has reinvented itself. It has moved from hardware to software, from enterprise to consumer, from web to mobile, from SaaS to AI. The road is not a static place. It is a dynamic organism that evolves with the times. One of the most exciting trends on the road today is the convergence of multiple technologies. Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, quantum computing, and robotics are beginning to merge. Startups are working on things that seemed impossible 10 years ago: self-driving cars, lab-grown meat, gene editing, fusion energy. The road is funding them all. The venture capitalists are no longer just investing in software. They are investing in the future of civilization. The stakes have never been higher. There is a story that venture capitalists like to tell. It is about a young founder who walks into a meeting on Sand Hill Road. He has no business plan, no product, no team, just an idea scribbled on a napkin. The partner listens, thinks, and says, "Let me introduce you to someone who can help." That someone is another founder, another investor, another expert. The road is a network of introductions. It is a system of serendipity. The founder leaves the meeting not with a check, but with a connection. And that connection leads to another, and another until one day the idea becomes a company and the company becomes a success. That is the magic of Sand Hill Road. It is not just about money. It is about the people and the relationships that make things happen. In the quiet hours of the evening, when the last venture capitalist has left the office, the road is still. The wind blows through the trees. The crickets chirp. The buildings stand silent, waiting for the morning, and then it begins again. The founders arrive, the coffee brews, the pitches start. The road is a cycle of hope and disappointment, of triumph and failure, but it is always moving forward. It is a road that leads somewhere, even if that destination is always changing. Perhaps the greatest legacy of Sand Hill Road is not the companies it has built or the fortunes it has created, but the spirit it has inspired. It has taught generations of entrepreneurs that it is okay to fail, that failure is not the end but a step on the path. It has taught them that the biggest risks often yield the biggest rewards. It has taught them that the world can be changed, one startup at a time. And as long as that spirit endures, Sand Hill Road will endure. It will be there waiting for the next dreamer, ready to say yes, ready to take a chance, ready to build the future. And so the road continues. It winds through the hills of Silicon Valley, carrying with it the hopes and ambitions of 1,000 founders, 1,000,000 employees, and countless investors. It is a road that has helped build not just an industry, but a way of thinking about the world. It is a road that will never be finished because the future is never finished. The road is always under construction, and that is exactly how it should be. The road is always under construction, and that is exactly how it should be. But what does that construction look like in practice? On any given morning, you can see it in the small details. A construction crew patching a pothole, a new sign going up outside a firm that just raised its latest fund, a cafe that has swapped out its menu for the third time this year, trying to keep up with the tastes of the venture capitalists who stop in for espresso between meetings. The road itself is a living document, a record of every bet that was made, every company that succeeded or failed. The asphalt remembers the footsteps of the founders who walked it, the tires of the cars that carried them to their meetings, the rain that washed away their tears after a rejection. And the road keeps changing because the people it serves keep changing. There is a story that sums up this constant evolution. It is about a founder named Alina. She was raised in a small town in the Central Valley, the daughter of farm workers. She saw how hard her parents worked, how technology barely touched their lives. She decided to build a platform that would connect small farmers directly to buyers, cutting out the middlemen and using machine learning to optimize pricing and logistics. She had no Ivy League degree, no network, no pedigree. But she had a deep understanding of the problem because she had lived it. She drove to Sand Hill Road with nothing but a laptop and a dream. The first few meetings were brutal. Partners questioned her technical skills, her market size, her ability to scale. One partner even asked her if she had considered going back to school. She held back tears and kept going. Then she met a partner at a firm that specialized in agtech. That partner was the son of a farmer himself. He listened to Alina's story, saw the passion in her eyes, and decided to take a chance. He wrote a check for $500,000. It was not a huge amount, but it was enough. Today, Alina's company serves over 10,000 farms and has reduced food waste by 30% in several regions. She still lives modestly, but she has a new mission: to make sure that the next generation of founders from rural America knows that Sand Hill Road is not just for the elite. She speaks at conferences, mentors young entrepreneurs, and reminds them that the road is open to anyone who has the courage to show up. This is the quiet revolution taking place on Sand Hill Road. It is not always visible in the headlines about billion-dollar unicorns or blockbuster IPOs. It is visible in the faces of the founders who do not fit the old mold. It is visible in the diversity of the startups that now populate the portfolios of the most established firms. It is visible in the conversations that happen over lunch, where partners debate whether to invest in a company led by a formerly incarcerated founder or a team of engineers who are all refugees. The road is learning that the best ideas can come from the most unexpected places, and that is a lesson that goes beyond venture capital. It is a lesson about the human condition, that we are all capable of greatness if given a chance. So as the sun sets over the hills, casting long shadows across the road, the construction continues. A new building is going up on a plot that used to be a parking lot. A young analyst is staying late to prepare a memo about a startup that wants to use drones to plant trees. A founder is pacing outside, waiting for a call that could change everything. The road is never quiet for long. It is a machine that runs on hope and hustle. And it will keep running because the world still needs the things that Sand Hill Road builds. The world needs the next Google, the next Apple, the next cure for a disease, the next solution to climate change. And the road will be there, ready to host the meetings, fund the experiments, and celebrate the victories. It will also be there to absorb the losses, to offer a second chance, to remind everyone that failure is just a stepping stone. This is the story of Sand Hill Road, a ribbon of asphalt that became the backbone of innovation. It is a story of people, not pavement, of dreams, not dollars, of a place that exists at the intersection of ambition and reality. And as long as there is someone willing to take a risk, someone willing to say yes, someone willing to build, the road will endure. It will wind through the hills, through the decades, through the changes that come with time. It will remain a symbol of what is possible when a community of believers comes together, and it will continue to write the next chapter, one pitch, one handshake, one check at a time. The road is always under construction, and that is exactly how it should be.